Assalamu alaikum everyone, this is a request-based video, Types of Observational Methods by Dear Knowledge. Basically, if you just go through the book, according to book point of view, there are only two types of observational methods, that is naturalistic observation and the laboratory observation. But since I got the request in the comment on the types of observational methods, and then she wanted to have a video on more types of observational methods, so here are the more types of observational methods. If you want to study observation in great detail, then there are some other types of observational methods, which are pilot observation, overt and covert observation, participant observation and non-participant observations, structured observation and unstructured observation, naturalistic observation, and controlled observation. So let's start with the observational method. The definition include observational methods in psychological research entail the observation and description of a subject's behavior. And observational studies are, you can say the definition of observation is that observation is a mean of gathering information for research, may be defined as perceiving data through the senses, that is sense of vision, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. It involves the empirical data, the observation, and observational methods include observation and description of subjects' behavior. Observational studies are investigations where the researchers observe a situation and records what happens, but does not manipulate the independent variable. So if you have watched the video of the goals of psychology, the description is discussed in great detail, and I have given the link of that video in the description. You can check that video, then your concept will be more clear. So the pilot observation, the definition includes the checklist for observational method tested before the main observation to ensure that all potential behaviors are covered and the observer can use the checklist successfully. This is called pilot observation. If you want to conduct a research, you will have to do a pilot study. And if you want to launch a project, you will have to launch the pilot project. Same is the case with observation. If you want to do the initial observation, you will have to do the pilot observation first. The pilot observation and pilot study or pilot project ensures that what is necessary and what is the advantages and disadvantages of the study you're conducting or the project you're going to launch, or the observation which you're going to do. The pilot is a term used for like you want to make a checklist of something, whether it is a successful or not, what will be the advantages and disadvantages of that thing. So that is called the pilot observation. So pilot observation is basically checklist for the behavioral observation. So prior to observing, the psychologist must create a behavioral checklist called an ethogram if observing non-humans. This checklist must name each behavior that the psychologist is expecting to see. A checklist must be tested before the main observation to ensure that all potential behaviors are covered and the observer can use the checklist successfully. So this is called the pilot observation. Now, what can be observed? The physical activities, verbal behaviors, expressive behavior, spatial behavior, temporal patterns, physical objects, verbal and pictorial records, neurological events. These are the things which you can observe, which can be observed. There are, in observing behavior, there are two ways in which an observer can sample behavior. One is time sampling and the other is event sampling. The time sampling, these are the behaviors recorded in specific time interval, and there are three types of time sampling, that is instantaneous scan, predominant activity scan, 1-0 scan. Instantaneous scan is the behavior that is being recorded at the start of each set of time interval. For example, every 10 seconds, whatever behavior is being observed, shown by a child in the playground is recorded. Predominant activity scan is where the observer records the most frequent behavior shown by the person being observed in a set of time period. For example, observing in a 10-second time period. 1-0 scan, the definition include 1-0 scan is where the observer records whether each behavior happened or did not happen within the time period set. Frequency of that behavior is not recorded, just whether the behavior happened or not. And now let's come to the event sampling. Event sampling is where every time a behavior is seen in the person being observed is computed. A set time period is decided upon before recording behavior or recording begins. Now let's come to the advantages of behavior. The purpose of observation is to enable the researcher to gather empirical data which are difficult to obtain by other means. To enable the researcher to gather specific data to supplement or verify information gathered by other means, and to enable the researcher to gather information or data needed to describe the aspect of variable being studied which cannot be described accurately without observation. So the purpose of observation is to enable the researcher to gather directly primary data or first-hand information for his study for a more accurate description and interpretation. And it is also done to enable the researcher to gather data from the laboratory or elsewhere through the experimentation. The advantages of observation would include if the participants are unaware of that they are being observed, then they will behave naturally. This increases the ecological validity of observation. Ecological validity refers to the extent to which the findings of a research study are able to be generalized in real-life setting. As behaviors are counted and are hence qualitative, the process is objective and the data can be analyzed statistically with minimal bias. Disadvantages would include if the participants are unaware that they are being observed, then they may not act naturally and socially desirable. This reduces the validity of a finding, and it is also known as observer's effect. It may be difficult to replicate the study if it is naturalistic or many variables cannot be controlled, so this reduces the validity of the study, reliability of the study. Now let's come to the overt and covert observation. This is a type of observation. In overt observation is when participant knows who the researcher is and that they are being observed. And the covert observation is when participants do not know that the researcher in the group is observing them. Especially secret agents are doing this part. They are doing the covert observation. Now let's come to the participant and non-participant observation. Participant observation, researcher become part of the group and the researcher can be overt or covert. Researcher interact with the participant and take notes on behaviors, comments, etc. For example, if you want to observe the behavior of the children, you can become part of that group. And in order to become part of that group, you can either do the overt observation, and you can be a covert observer. So in a participant observation, you will become part of the children's group and you will play with them just like the way they do. And this way you will be more able to observe their behavior, their comments, and other relevant information. Now let's come to the advantages of the participant observation. Usually the participants being observed are in real life setting, so there is increased ecological validity. And ecological validity, as I told you, refers to the extent to which the findings of a research study are able to be generalized in real life setting. And observers become involved with the group, they are more likely to understand the motives and reasons for behavior. This increases the validity of the findings. There are some disadvantages of the participant observation, as there are ethical problems, as the informed consent of those being placed into the groups has not been initially You can say they are not informed, so the informed consent is not given, and this can cause ethical problem. In the presence of the outsiders, the observer can initially change the behavior of the group. This lowers the validity of the findings, which you can say the findings. Now let's come to the non-participant observation. This is when the researcher is away from the people or animal being observed. This can also be an overt or covert process. The researcher does not interact with any of the participants. For example, the player is playing in the football match. They know that the audience is observing them. At this time, the audience are kind of a non-participant observation, and the player know that the audience is observing them, but still they are performing their role, their responsibility. For example, if you are observing them and you are a chief guest at that football match, the player know that the chief guest, which is you, is observing them, and still they're playing well. So in this case, the non-participant observation is done, and it is a type of an overt process. You are not doing a non-participant observation because you're not part of that group. You're away from that group, but you're observing them. But in case if you're not the chief guest and you're just hiddenly walking through the audience and you're just observing the players, at that time you're doing the covert observation and you are a non-participant and you're performing non-participant observation, but in a covert manner. Same is the case if you are a part of an inspection team and you suddenly visit to a school. You're not telling them that you're observing them. You just walk around and you're not part of that group. In this case, you're doing the non-participant observation, but in a covert manner. But if you tell them that you're observing them, but you're not part of that group, so you're doing the non-participant observation, but in an overt manner. They know that you're observing them. Now let's come to the advantages of the participant observation. Participant observation will not be affected by knowing that they are being observed because the observers are out of sight. Researcher blends in and does not influence the behavior of a group. Participants tend to act statistically in case of covert observation. Now, in case of participant observation, the observer takes active part in the activities of the group being observed, and it means that the activities of a group in which the observer himself participate and know the situation, and is willingly mixes with a group and perform his activities as an observer and not merely a participator who criticizes the situation. In other words, you can say that he takes place and share the activities with his group. In case of the non-participant observation has a lack of participation of the observer in his group activities. He either watch the phenomena from a distance or participate in the group, but never in its activities. He only sits in the group but do not interest in the process. So the advantages would be that although observer himself never attached to the group, but the objectivity maintained. Less emotional involvement of the observer leads to accuracy and greater objectivity. And though non-participant observation, through non-participant observation, the researcher remains very smooth. Now let's come to the disadvantages of the participant observation. It is difficult to make detailed observation because you're not part of that group, you're away from that group and you're trying to observe them. So you do not have the full knowledge about the group activities and you cannot understand the whole phenomena. You cannot get the real and deep insight into the phenomena. And you do not have the full knowledge about the group activity. Now let's come to the structured and unstructured observation. Structured observation is also called systematic observation. It includes behavioral checklist, a predominantly quantitative method, non-participant method. Researchers often use configurates to create the structured situation, and it is an event sampling process. For structured observation, the researcher specifies in detail what is to be observed and how the measurements are to be recorded. For example, an auditor performing inventory analysis in stone, etc. So, researcher sets up a specific situation in order to observe people's behavior. Structured observation is useful when behavior is difficult to observe as it occurs naturally. So, in this way, researchers often use confederates to create the structured situation. The advantages include that the coding system allows the objective quantitative data to be calculated, and this can be analyzed statistically. Whereas the disadvantages is the sampling of a behavior tends to be restrictive and does not give an idea of the reason why behavior are occurring. Now let's come to the unstructured observation. This is when observers note all the behaviors that they can see in qualitative form over a period of time. No behavioral checklist is used, as the observers simply record what is happening in real time. The observer is given a freedom to decide on the spot to observe everything that is relevant. It is a quantitative, in this observation, qualitative data is collected, usually qualitative data is collected, and the time sampling technique is used. The advantages include that this type of observation can generate in-depth, rich qualitative data that can help explain why behavior is occurring. Whereas the disadvantages can include that observers may easily be drawn to noticeable or eye-catching behavior that may not fully represent all the behaviors occurring during the observation period. That observer can easily get distracted. Now let's come to the naturalistic observation. I have already uploaded a video on naturalistic observation and laboratory observation. If you haven't watched that video, I have given the link in the description. You can click on that link. That link will take you to that video. You can watch that video. That video is in great detail on naturalistic observation as well as laboratory observation. So must watch that video if you really want to learn about naturalistic observation and laboratory observation. In this video, I will just only give you the brief discussion on naturalistic observation as well as laboratory observation. Naturalistic observation is the systematic observation and recording of behavior as they occur in their natural settings. And a naturalistic observation takes place in a person's or animal's own natural environment. The advantages of naturalistic observation include that you get the real result, natural result, and you can generalize it. Whereas the disadvantages of the naturalistic observation include the observer's effect, and it sometimes includes personal bias and the blind observer. I have given the link in the description. You can watch that video. So, in controlled observation takes place in a controlled environment. For example, during in an experiment in a lab, the observer could be behind a one-way mirror. It is also a type of laboratory observation because it is performed in a lab. It can be overt and covert. In a form of overt, the participants know that they are being observed. For example, in case of if you want to perform a nonsense syllable experiment on the people or a memory test on them, they know that they are being observed and an experiment is conducted on them. Or you can do it in a form of a covert manner, that you can use one-sided mirrors and they will not know that they are being observed in a lab. The advantages of the controlled observation include that you have the control over environment. You have the control over environment. That is the main advantage of the laboratory observation. And the disadvantages would include that you do not get that much real result, just like the way you get in the naturalistic observation. So, carrying out the observation in an artificial setting can easily influence participants' behavior. For example, children may be anxious in an environment that is different from their usual environment. As the setting is artificial, the finding may be a lack of ecological validity. So this was the end of the video. If you got the point, your concept is clear, you can like the video. If not, you can ask us in the comment on which topic you got a bit confused and which topic was difficult to understand, and we will try our best to clear your concept over there, because our main aim is to clear your concept and to make knowledge easy to understand. And if you want to stay updated, if you want to get notification of the upcoming videos, you can subscribe to our channel, because we usually upload the course-based video on every Saturday and Sunday. Yet we have started our full course of Introduction to Psychology Part 1. On every Saturday and Sunday we upload the videos on Introduction to Psychology Part 1, and inshallah after that we will start our new course, and our course related videos are uploaded on every Saturday and Sunday. If you want to be part of that course, you can subscribe to our channel. You will get daily notification of the upcoming videos. And on normal days, we usually upload request-based videos. So if you have any request, you can write down in the comment, and we will try our level best to make an easy and understandable video that is easy for you to understand and your concept can be cleared. So if there any topic, there is a confusion in that topic and it's difficult for you people to understand, you can simply write down in the comment, and you can share this video with your friends and family, because sharing is caring. Until then, Allah Hafiz.